I looked up from my life and realized I had lost a very important part of myself along the way. I made this video for anyone who has found themselves so focused on their daily routines, chores, and obligations that they felt like they've had to let go of art making. Maybe it didn't feel like a choice. Maybe the realities of life, work, and school took precedence, and making art was shoved to the side for longer than you ever intended. Maybe you had a sudden and sharp realization that something was missing. Maybe you've had a vague but growing feeling of loss. I'm sharing my story as an artist who is finding her way back to making art because I think that it is a common struggle for creative people. Hello, and welcome back to another video. This one's a little bit more personal, but I think what I have to share will resonate with some people. I am a visual artist who has not had any sort of serious or focused creative practice in about a decade. I haven't worked in my sketchbook routinely, and I've only made a handful of things at random. I haven't improved my technical skill or even maintained it, and I'm really not okay with any of this. In this video, I'm going to talk about how I got here and what I plan to do about it. I've always been an artist. From a very early age, I loved drawing. I took art lessons. I painted with my grandma. My elementary school art teacher noticed my interest and my skill pretty early on, and she offered me after-school lessons where we learned beyond the curriculum at the time. My parents were incredibly supportive, and I've always been really grateful for that. In high school, I took advanced art classes, and I even attended a summer arts program that accepted a small number of students based on portfolios and creative applications. All this is to say is that from very early on, artist was a part of my identity and was less a hobby, activity, or interest and more of a personality trait that I felt was intrinsic to myself. I think that identifying as an artist has been a strength and a weakness of mine, but we'll get to that later. When I went to college, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do, but I wanted to study art. I took a lot of classes in a bunch of different mediums, and I really fell in love with printmaking. I loved the technical element with the equipment and the chemicals, and I really loved how it complemented my interests in comic book making and zine making. But what I really loved about printmaking was that you were making things like posters and t-shirts and items that were meant to be distributed out to the public and not stored away in a museum or a gallery. I loved that the art that I was making felt like a part of the world. When I graduated with my BFA, I still wasn't sure what I wanted to do, but I didn't want to make art my job. My arts interests and skills didn't really line up with any arts jobs that I knew of, and because I was young and inexperienced, I didn't make connections with how different skills and interests might play out in different jobs. I honestly didn't have any kind of plan, and I just figured it would work itself out. I job jumped for the next few years between vastly different worlds. So I worked on a farm, I worked in a school, I worked at a coffee shop, and I loved learning, so with each new job, there were novel challenges, new priorities, and different ways of thinking about things. This was a really intellectually stimulating time for me, and it mimicked, really, a classroom learning situation or a studio situation. I was still making some art on the side, but without the deadlines that come from a school assignment, I didn't have any pressure to complete anything, and I really wasn't doing that much. I was drawing, but I didn't have access to the university studio anymore, and I didn't have the money to set up a home print studio. At the time, art seemed like something that I was going to have to leave to the side until I kind of got my life together. As time went on, I settled into a job that I loved that was not in the art world, but it did use a lot of creative thinking and energy. I wasn't making things, but I was coming up with ideas, building out concepts, and doing a lot of creative problem solving. If I'm being honest, I didn't really notice when I stopped making art at this time because I was so creatively fulfilled by what I was doing at my job. I noticed after about a year or so of being in this job and having a stable routine that my art making was basically down to zero. I think this was the first time that I sort of was able to take stock of what was going on because I wasn't switching jobs, moving houses, and going through any number of other confusing things that was happening in my 20s. So this was really the first time that I was able to look at what was going on. And instead of taking stock of things and adjusting, I told myself that I'd been busy and that of course I was an artist and I would make art whenever I had time and I felt like it. This is where the curse of identifying as an artist comes into play because I was so sure of artist and art being a part of my identity, I didn't feel the need to protect it and make space for it, and I think that that's really where things started to go wrong for me. I thought that my artistic skill and my creative drive would always be easily accessible, and that I could make art or not make art whenever I felt like it, and it wouldn't hurt me or like my artistic skills to temporarily abandon what I was doing. Flash forward a few more years and my temporary art hiatus continued. My partner was much more aware of how I was negatively impacting myself by not making art, and he would encourage me to make things. And sometimes I would, sometimes I wouldn't, but nothing felt good to make. At this point, I was in a total slump. I saw myself as something that I no longer was. Every time that I would sit down to draw or to paint, it felt inauthentic, it felt forced, it felt uncomfortable. It felt like something that I had never felt when I had made art. On occasion, someone would say, "Oh, you're artistic, why don't you make the poster for this event," or something similar. And usually I would get out of it by saying that I was too busy or some other excuse. And on occasion I would agree to it, and I would be bolstered by getting positive feedback. In those moments, I would think that I was back to making art for real, and it didn't stick because I was only feeling good from external validation and not internal fulfillment. 2 years ago, I was still on this path. I tried to draw or paint when I felt like I had the energy for it, but I felt it so infrequently because it felt so bad to do it. It felt like a hassle and a waste of time to pull out my materials only to force myself to make something that didn't make me happy and that I wasn't proud of. Having gone so long without making routinely, I could see a loss of technical skill in addition to a loss of comfort in making things. And so on top of feeling like I was forcing myself to make something and to do something uncomfortable, I also felt incredibly guilty for allowing everything to go on as long as it had, and to see the lack of skill in something that I had previously been very good at. This was the point where I really understood what I had lost, and it felt really permanent. But it's also the turning point of our story. In addition to my art problems, I was dealing with a back injury that was taking a long time to heal. All I could manage during this time was going to work and then coming back home to rest my back with ice or a heating pad. And I really couldn't do any of my active hobbies. And while I love reading and I love playing video games, I got to the point where I just felt like I truly couldn't take it anymore, and I needed something new to distract myself with. Sort of at random, I picked up knitting. I'd never really had much interest in making my own clothing or clothing design or even really fiber arts up until that point, but I saw a couple of patterns that I thought were really cool and were like way beyond my skill set, and I figured I would try it out. If you told me 5 years ago that I would be an avid knitter, I would never have believed you, but learning a totally new skill was really engaging to me. I think because I was in such a low place with the back injury, knitting felt like a creative lifeline to me, and I almost immediately clung to it. It was so hard to learn, but I loved picking out the colors and the materials, and I love that I get to take what I make out into the world. I'm still very much developing my skills, but I'm loving how far that I've come, and I'm very proud. Knitting along to a pattern gives me the creative experience of making something without the creative pressure of coming up with the plan. I know that I just need to show up, practice what I've learned, and follow the recipe or the pattern. Without even thinking about it, I establish an almost daily knitting practice where I'm working on different techniques, growing my skill set, setting and achieving goals, and creating things that bring me so much joy. While I'll probably never be a knitwear designer, I'm at the point where I'm thinking beyond the recipe, and I want to make things of my own invention. Knitting felt incredibly uncomfortable at first, because it was new, and sometimes it still feels uncomfortable when I'm doing things I've never done before. But I don't expect myself to do anything other than the best that I can do and to keep trying. This is the basis for any creative practice, and I believe that because I was able to do it for knitting, I can apply it to the rest of my artistic life. I'm 10 years older than when I took my first serious step away from making art, and I finally feel like I'm ready to return to the artist that's been waiting inside of me. I feel like knitting has given me the creative confidence to think about making other things in a way that's fun and exciting, and to not let the creative discomfort dissuade me from enjoying the process. It has also shown me that I have the ability to show up daily and work on and improve a creative skill. So let's talk about the plan. My plan for developing a creative practice based around drawing, comics, and printmaking has multiple components. I want to make a plan that's sustainable and that doesn't expect too much too soon. I think that the reason that I was able to develop a daily knitting practice is because I didn't put too much pressure on myself to perform, just to try. Making art to me is like going to the gym. You can't do a crazy workout routine for a week and then stop and expect that it's going to give the same results as a moderate regular exercise over years. So I want to come up with something that's very sustainable and that I can keep going and keep building on for hopefully the rest of my life. The number one thing that I am incorporating is a daily sketchbook habit. To start off, I'm going to draw or paint or sketch in my sketchbook daily. This will be a low stakes but scheduled activity, much like my knitting. The art doesn't have to be finished or even nice to look at, and I probably won't share these images with anyone. This is just about building the habit and setting aside time in my day to make art. And it's about building the habit of drawing and learning to enjoy it again. If you know you're going to draw every day for 20 minutes just because you do something that's ugly or doesn't look good or you're not proud of on one day, it doesn't mean that the next day isn't going to be something better. I may end up picking out a list of creative prompts or just draw from a reference photo. This is purely about habit building. For now, I'm setting this as a timed activity for 20 minutes. If I want to go over 20 minutes, I absolutely can, but I'm setting it at 20 minutes for now to make it feel very manageable and not like totally overwhelming to me. Number 2, I will be giving myself assignments. I'll be sitting down in the next month or so, and I'm going to think of a handful of creative ideas and goals that I would like to pursue. Some of them that I can think of offhand are working on a series of short comics or screen printing a small run of shirts. Much like knitting, I'm most interested in building my skills when I can apply them to something that's like a larger project and I want to see how they can work out. I plan to share the process of these larger projects online in some capacity. And I'll probably also share a video as I'm coming up with my ideas. Number 3, I also want to learn intentionally. In school, so much of my art practice was informed by art history classes that I attended, contemporary artist lectures, and ideas that were being discussed by peers and professors. Outside of school, in a non-art job, it is very easy to stop thinking about art. I plan to seek out books, experiences, and movies that will supplement my arts knowledge and help me grow. I'm so inspired by creative thinkers and other makers, and I just want more of that in my life. And I think it's really important to seek out those types of things if you want to continue growing. So this is how I am starting out my creative change. But I know that as I progress and as I develop, I'll adjust and I'll refine my creative practice. But I think for now, the important thing is that I just start. My artist self has been waiting for a decade, and she is a little less confident and a little less skilled than she was 10 years ago, but she's still there. I suspect my experience is not unique. There's so much value in making art, but it was disturbingly easy to gradually deprioritize it in my life. I felt like I was making responsible choices by focusing on my work and my home life, and in the process, I forgot what the point of it all was. I'm only at the beginning of my story, and I don't know where the path leads from here, but I'm feeling really, really hopeful. I feel like I'm on the brink of something really special, and I feel like I'm ready to approach it head on. I believe that through building good creative habits and pushing past some emotional art baggage, I have the ability to reclaim something that has always been central to my self-identity. If my story feels like your story, or you've experienced anything similar, I would love to hear your thoughts. Have you lost your artistic way? Found it again, maybe? This feels like a very vulnerable topic to me, but I feel like it's really important to share it and to connect with people that feel the same way. If you're interested in tagging along, I do plan to document my creative process and my artistic process as a way to hold myself accountable, and also to have some positive documentation for if I try to talk myself out of pursuing the thing that I love. So feel free to join me here. And that's all I've got for today. I hope that maybe you found something meaningful in this, and I personally found a lot of meaning just in like writing this stuff down and talking through it for myself. Thank you so much for being here, and I'll see you next time. Bye.